What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I go into great detail with all of the stats of every weapon as well as their variants in Infinite Warfare. In today's episode, we're moving on to the FHR. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so hopping into the stats here, the FHR is one of the few guns in the game that actually has 4 damage profiles. It's got 30, 23, 19, 16. This means it's going to be a 4 to 7 shot kill gun, which is ridiculous. Once you get to 7 shot kill range, that's a lot of shots to be hitting, especially with the recoil of this gun, which we'll be looking at in a little bit. For rate of fire, it's the fastest in the SMG category as long as we're not looking at any variants at 967 rounds per minute. And our time to kill values at each respective range is going to be ranging from 186 milliseconds all the way up to 372 milliseconds. This thing kills very, very quickly up close, but it drops off quite fast to a decently slow time to kill because taking 7 shots to kill, even with a high fire rate, it's going to take some time. Our aim down sight time is standard for SMGs at 230 milliseconds. Sprint out time, again, standard for SMGs at 150 milliseconds. Our reload add time is right around average for SMGs at 1.55 seconds, movement speed 98%, and our magazine capacity is 40 rounds with a total starting ammo, including the magazine in your gun when you spawn, of 120 rounds. Moving on to the range of the FHR, this is where this gun starts to fall down a little bit. As you can see here, it drops off to that 7-shot kill quite soon, and therefore you've got to keep yourself in very close quarters with the FHR, or else you're just not going to be able to compete with anything in the game, because hitting 7 shots before another guy hits 3 to 4 shots, it doesn't happen too often. So I would say range is one of the biggest downfalls of this gun. Moving on to hip spread, it's slightly worse than pretty much all of the other SMGs. It is going to be a little bit noticeable in game, but overall it's not too bad, as you can see here. Now let's get into our headshot damage, and this has a standard multiplier of 1.1 for headshots, meaning that your headshot damage profile goes to a 33, 25, 20, 17, and overall what that means is unless you're hitting like all headshots with every single one of your shots, it's not going to be doing anything for you ever. So headshots for the FHR, I would say don't even bother with them. Now finally, for the base FHR, let's have a look at recoil, and this is the second area where this gun really falls down. I believe it has the highest recoil in the game out of anything. I can't think of anything that has more recoil than the FHR. You can very clearly see it here. It kicks very strongly upwards, and then usually it drifts to the right as well. This means that it is somewhat predictable, so if you are really good with recoil control, you can pull down on your right analog stick as well as a little bit to the left and counteract that recoil a bit, but still it's going to be quite high recoil. So this is just another area that reinforces the fact that this gun is designed for very close quarters combat. Trying to challenge those people at mid to longer ranges isn't typically going to be a good idea with the FHR. Alright, so now that we've covered the base FHR, let's move on to the variants of the gun. And just in case you're wondering where these variants are, I know some people still, for whatever reason, haven't found out how to get these. You get FHR variants by completing mission team challenges. As you level up your mission teams, you will unlock these variants. And first up, we have the common variant called the Counterweight. This one gives you stability, which gives you a 3% reduction to your view kick. Having a look at my 10-round recoil plots, you can see just how much that 3% view kick actually helps. Generally with this gun, I feel like it is noticeable having that 3% view kick, and you can bump this all the way up to a 10% view kick reduction if you combine the counterweight with a grip. Now keep in mind, you will still get certain times where it just kicks straight up. You can see that on the far right recoil plot right there. Even with counterweight and a grip, sometimes it just goes straight up or it gets a little bit out of hand. But on average, it is going to be helping you a noticeable amount in my opinion. And this is why this is actually one of my favorite variants to use for the FHR. Even though it's a common, I really like that recoil reduction. Moving on to the rare variant of the FHR, we have the Requisition. This one gives you head rush as well as sharpshooter. And with head rush, headshot kills will grant a small bonus to your payload meter. I did the math on this one, and your charge time is reduced by an extra 5 seconds every time you get a headshot kill. Now just for reference, in most respawn game modes, every time you get a kill, your payload charge time will be reduced by 5 seconds. This essentially doubles the amount of charge time that is reduced for every time you get a kill, as long as it's a headshot. As for sharpshooter, this one increases your range by 5%. Pretty straightforward. Moving on to the legendary variant, we've got the Havoc. This one gives you nuclear as well as steady, and nuclear gives you that deatomizer strike after a 25 gun streak. We've seen this before, pretty sure you guys all know what this does. And then we have steady, which will reduce your hip spread by 20%, which is very noticeable. I wouldn't say this is the best nuke variant in the game, but it's definitely not too bad. Now finally, we've got the epic variant of the FHR called the Windfall. Now I've already done a whole video talking all about the Windfall. I will link that in the description below. You guys can go check that out if you want to go see more information on this and get the exact numbers and everything. But essentially, this one gives you Invigorate, which every time you kill an enemy, it will refill a portion of your health. And what I concluded in that video is the lower your health is, the less amount of health that you actually regenerate. It's not a percentage sort of thing. I couldn't figure out exactly what their formula was to use that. But overall, the more you're hurt, the less this helps you. If you're only hurt a little bit though, getting one kill will completely regenerate your health. In addition to this, we have Stockpile, which will increase your magazine capacity up to 48 rounds, which is great because of the high fire rate of this gun. And that will take your total starting ammo, including the magazine in the gun when you spawn, up to 144 rounds. So overall, out of all the variants, I actually prefer the common variant most of the time, unless I'm trying to go for a nuke or something like that. I really like the common variant of the FHR because of that stability weapon perk. In my opinion, a lot of the other weapon perks on the other variants, they might help in some situations and they're kind of neat and things like that, but they don't help every single gunfight like that stability weapon perk will. Even with the epic Windfall, I tend to avoid using this gun. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I feel like that health regeneration perk doesn't really do too much for me in most situations. So therefore, I would much rather have something that's reducing my recoil with such a high recoil gun like the FHR. As for my preferred setups with the FHR, I've got a couple different ways that I like to run this. Pretty much anything goes with this gun. It all depends on your personal preference and playstyle, so I'm not going to tell you you have to use these attachments or anything, but I'm going to tell you how I tend to like setting it up. My first setup is going to have quick draw foregrip, and then if I'm having a third attachment, maybe suppressor on there as well. This is more when I'm trying to keep my gunfights a little bit more mid-range. I'm planning on aiming down sight in most of my gunfights, and just getting onto target really quickly, snapping on a target, being accurate, and also staying off the radar. That's my first setup. Another setup that I like to use is going to be suppressor, laser sight, and extended mags. With this one, I'm going to be rushing around, hip firing pretty much everything, and I find that to be very effective with this gun because it's got such a high fire rate. Having a suppressor on there, I don't feel like it really matters all that much because your fire rate is so high and you're already going to be trying to keep your gunfights pretty much point blank. So suppressor is purely bonus to me, at least for this particular playstyle, and therefore I just really like that particular setup. Overall for the FHR, I feel like this gun is often overlooked. I don't see this coming up too often in public matches, and part of that is likely due to the fact that its recoil properties are not the greatest, and a lot of the maps in this game tend to push gunfights a little bit beyond the effective range of the FHR, but having said that, if you're good at navigating the maps and keeping your gunfights up close, this gun is a beast. It has a lot of potential, it's just very limited within its niche. If you guys have tried this gun before and it hasn't really been working out for you, next time you get into one of those close quarters maps, pop on the FHR, give it another go, and see what you think of it. I feel like it might be a pleasant surprise for you as long as you're making sure you're keeping your gunfights up close. I'd like to know in the comment section below, what is your favorite variant as well as class setup when using the FHR? And with that, we're going to wrap up today's episode of Gun Guides. If you guys have missed any of the previous episodes, I've covered all of the assault rifles and a couple of the SMGs. I will leave a link down below to the playlist. If you're interested in more guns, definitely go and check that out. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.